Welcome to DevOps Clinic. My name is Matt, and I've been a Linux system admin, network engineer, and DevOps engineer for over 25 years. I'm also a SaltStack certified engineer. We're continuing with our Getting Started with Salt project series. Today we'll be covering more configuration management techniques, such as advanced targeting minions in the top file, basic organization in salt states, and pillar data. If you haven't watched any of our previous videos yet, there'll be links below in the description. If at any time you have questions or comments about the video, please leave them in the comments below. Our goal is to help you learn new skills as a DevOps engineer or sysadmin. So if there's a problem you're stuck on, we're here to help. Okay, so in our previous episode, we were working with some configuration management and we were editing the top file. And we had created this config here, which basically says that all minions will get the world state. And in this case, world is a folder that has an init file, and it also has a files folder with a Jinja template. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do some more advanced techniques for targeting minions in your salt state. So the first one we're going to look at is just to define specific minion names. So one example is if we had servers that were web servers and started with the word web, we could do web asterisk, and then we could say that we want to target the roles.web server. And this is also a new concept that we haven't covered previously. So as I mentioned, world is a folder, but if you see a period in your state names, this refers to subfolders. So roles.web server could either be the roles folder and a webserver.sls file, or roles folder with a web server folder with an init.sls file in it. And what this will do is any server that begins with web will automatically get this state. So let's also do a DB, and we'll do the same thing. We're going to say roles.database, and let's also do one where we can target both a name, and previously we had also talked about grains. Grains are information about our minions that the minions know about, and we're going to create a grain on one of our servers called roles with a value of monitoring. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say if a server is called monitor, like if it begins with the word monitor, or we can specify if a grain called roles exists and it's equal to monitoring. So if it's the server name is monitor something, or has a grain called roles with the value of monitoring, it will apply this state. And so we're going to create a role called monitoring. And let's do a couple other ones here. What if we want to apply a state based on the operating system? So let's look at, there is a grain called OS, and this would have stuff like Red Hat, Debian, Ubuntu, or like Rocky or CentOS. And maybe we don't want to specify a whole paragraph for every single operating system. So we can do the following, where we specify multiple operating systems, and we use the pipe command to say or. So it's going to be Red Hat or Rocky or CentOS. And because this is actually a regex statement, what we want to do is we'll add this line called match, and we're going to say we're using a grain and then specify PCRE, and this is basically saying to use regex. And then the state that we're going to apply is, let's actually create one called repos.redhat. And then I'm going to show you another way that we can also specify this. So in this first method, if obviously this is related to Red Hat clones. We would have to go and specify each one individually. So if a new clone came out, we would have to come into any place where we reference this and update it. What we can also do is we can say the grain OS family is Red Hat. And we also want to match on this. And we're just going to match on the grain. So there's no regex involved in this. This will automatically catch any Red Hat variant or clone. Let's also do the same thing with, if we were to do OS Ubuntu, we would catch anything that is Ubuntu. This is a grain. And let's apply repos.ubuntu. And another example for the Ubuntus and Debians, we could say OS family is Debian. We want to match grain, and we'll say repos.debian. Now, in these couple statements here, we would only want to either use this one or this one. So either specify the regex version or OS family, or Ubuntu or Debian for OS or OS family. Otherwise, the Ubuntu servers are going to get this plus this. Same with Red Hat Rocky CentOS. They'll get both this, and I just realized that I also forgot we would want to specify the state that we're applying here. So what we'll do is we'll actually comment out the first versions of these, and we'll use the OS family to cover the targeting. Okay, so a couple more techniques that we can use to target minions here is if we wanted to create a list of servers, we could call the names, and this would have to be the full name that is used as the minion ID. So if we said minion1.devops.clinic and minion2.devops.clinic, and what we would do after this is we would also have a match line, and we would say list. So in this case, if either one of these two minions were to run a state, it's going to apply whatever we have here. So we could say, maybe this is roles.database. And one further one that I'd like to show you is where we just use plain regex. So let's use the caret symbol, which signifies the beginning of the string. And this is going to match on the host name. And we'll do bracket, memcache, pipe for the or, and we'll say web, period, and then let's say dev or QA dot local $, and we're going to match on regex, and let's say roles dot web server dot dev, and then we'll do another one just like this, memcache web prod.local $, and also match on regex roles.webserver.prod. Now, I normally would never do either of these two just because I don't name my servers like this, but what this does is it'll basically take the host name and it'll do a regex. So at the beginning of your host name, if it starts with either memcache or web, then has a period, then has either dev or QA, then a period, then local, and that's the end of the host name, it will run this role, so roles.webserver.dev. Whereas this one here, if it's memcache or web.prod, and I could actually get rid of those brackets since I don't have an or there, .local, then we're going to run roles.webserver.prod. Again, the way I set up my servers, I wouldn't do this. I tend to use the techniques above here. So let's go ahead and save this and go on to the next section. All right, so we are currently in the /srv/salt folder, and in this folder we currently have our top file and we have our world state folder. Now what I want to show you is kind of the basics of what I do when I'm setting up my salt states and how to organize them. So the first thing I do is create a core folder, and under core what I like to do is create services. I also like to create the main operating systems, and let's also add CentOS and Rocky, and I think we had Ubuntu as well. So in this folder we've got, this is going to be core dot, and there'll be CentOS, Debian, Red Hat, Rocky, services, and Ubuntu. And generally what I try to do is whenever there's general configs that I want across my network, I try to put them in core, and then I'll put them usually in services. And anything that can be applied to any distribution, I'll have them in services. Now sometimes when you're configuring servers in Linux, a configuration in CentOS might be a little different than in Debian or Ubuntu. And so that's why I then have separate folders for each of the operating systems. And then if I need to have even separate configs for, say, CentOS 7 and CentOS 8, I'll create subfolders down there. But usually I try to see what I can do as far as making reusable code where I could just put things in services. Next, in the salt directory, what I like to do is create a repos folder, and I also create a roles folder. Now the difference between core and roles is where I would have all the states for stuff like how is Apache set up, or how is Nginx set up, or how is MySQL, stuff like that. Under core, it's more general how I want servers configured, whether it's security settings, stuff like SSH, general settings, as opposed to application specific roles. So that's what I use for roles. So under roles, we had web server and we had database, and I think that was it for right now. I think we had also monitoring. So we'll have those three servers. And then under repos, this depends on how many repos you have to manage. I also like to add folders here as well. So we're going to create a Red Hat and we're going to create a Debian. All right. Next, let's go ahead and add some states so that we can play around with this targeting. So let's add a role for web server. And in it, we're going to just create a file that we manage. We're going to put this in root's home folder. All right. So we're going to create a file called /root/role_webserver.txt, and I'll say I am a web server. And for database, let's just copy this one, web server init to database. And let's do the same thing for monitoring. All right, so we've got 3 roles that we just added. All right, and so now let's add some repos. So let's add Debian. And again, we're not actually creating roles or repos, stuff like that. We're actually just putting text files on these servers to keep it simple. We'll actually get into managing a lot of that stuff in the future. So say repos Debian. Okay, and we will say my OS family is Debian. And let's do the same thing for Red Hat. Okay, so now we have a bunch of files that can get pushed out. And since the last video, I've actually gone ahead and reconfigured some of our minions. So just to show you what we have, we're going to do a grains.get on OS finger. And we can see here, previously we had minion 1, 2, and 3. And what I've done is I've provisioned a bunch of servers. So we have DB01, that's Fedora Linux. We of course have our Salt Master that's sent to us 7. Web 1 and 2, one of them is sent to us 7, one is Rocky Linux 8. We have one called Monitor, and that's Ubuntu. And then we have a Minion 5 that's Debian 11. And if you remember in our top file, we also had a match that was looking for either Monitor or looking for a grain called Roll. So for us to do this test, let's go ahead and on Minion 5, let's do a grain execution module, and we want to actually put a role on that server, so that what we want is we want both the monitor server and the Minion 5 server to get that monitoring role. So if we do grains set val, and we're going to set a grain called roles and call it monitoring. And if we were to query Minion 5 grains.get roles, we'll now see it has a monitoring role. All right, so now let's go ahead and let's apply these roles. So we're going to just apply, all servers are going to get their states applied. And by running state.apply without a role after it, it's going to just start at the top file, and for each minion it'll decide which states need to apply to it. Let's go ahead and run this, and I may need to speed up the video. Alright, so that didn't take too long. Let's scroll to the top up here. So we can see that for monitor 1, one of our original states that we had was the world state, and because it had an asterisk, it got applied here, so it created a directory, created the file. Now we can see it created the role monitoring text file because it matched on the name, and because it's of the OS family Debian, it also got the repos Debian file, and we can see no errors. And Minion 5, we can also see it ran the world state. Got the monitoring role, and it got the Debian repo because it's from OS family Debian. And we've got our Salt Master that also ran, and this is one thing to be careful about if you were to do salt star. If your Salt Master also has Minion running on it, you want to make sure it's not going to get caught in a state you don't want it to have run. So it applies the world state. Because it's a CentOS 7, it applies the Red Hat repo. Web 2 gets the world state, gets the web server role, and the Red Hat repo. And Web 1 also gets world state, web server role, and the Red Hat repo. for DB01, this was our Fedora server, and I will cover this in an extra little quirk about this in a minute, but you got the world state, the database role because it matched on the name, and it also got the OS family Red Hat. And if you use Fedora and a lot of the Red Hat variants, sometimes you'll know that some RPMs work on all of the RPM-based distros, whereas some only work on Red Hat, CentOS, Rocky, etc. And Fedora, usually you can't install some of those packages. So this is one thing to be careful about when you're working on your top file. If you use OS family Red Hat and you do have some Fedora servers in your network, this will get caught. This will catch your Fedora servers. So if you need to separate out your Red Hat and clones from your Fedora ones, this would be a better use for targeting. All right, we're starting to build the blocks to manage our servers with Salt. Go ahead and give this a try, what you've learned on your servers. Let me know how you did. And don't forget, if you have any comments or questions, let us know below. We would love to help you. And our next video should be out soon. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so you can be notified when it's available. If this video was helpful, please like and share. This helps show us that you find our content valuable. And until next time, automate everything.